The day I graduated, I kept scanning the crowd, waiting for my parents to show up. They never did. But 6 months later, I sent them one photo, and suddenly, they couldn't stop calling. My name is Lily Anderson, and I'm 56 years old now. But the story I'm about to tell you takes me back to a moment I'll never forget, the day I realized exactly where I stood in my own family. Growing up, my parents always had a favorite. And it wasn't me. It was my younger brother Ethan. To them, he was everything. Talented, special, different. That was the word they always used. Different enough to need more attention, more support, more understanding. And slowly, that turned into more everything. More praise, more patience, more priority. At first, I didn't question it. I told myself it made sense. That families weren't always perfectly balanced. That sometimes one child just needed more. But as the years went on, it stopped feeling like support and started feeling like neglect. Because every time something important happened in my life, it seemed to come second. Second to Ethan's needs. Second to his problems. Second to whatever was going on with him at the time. Birthdays were adjusted. Plans were changed. Moments were missed. And every time I felt hurt, there was always the same explanation. You understand, right? I did. At least, I tried to. Until the day I couldn't anymore. Graduation day. It was supposed to be one of the biggest days of my life. Not just because of the ceremony, but because of what it represented. Years of hard work, late nights, sacrifices, all leading to that one moment. Walking across that stage, hearing my name, knowing I had done it on my own. I had told my parents the date months in advance, reminded them multiple times, even sent them the invitation. And every time, they said the same thing. We'll be there. Simple, certain, reassuring, or at least, it was supposed to be. The morning of the graduation, I woke up early, nervous, excited, hopeful. I got ready slowly, carefully, like every detail mattered. Because it did. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a moment I had earned, and I wanted them there, more than anything. When I arrived at the venue, it was already filling up. Families, friends, laughter, pride in the air. I found my seat and sat down, holding my program tightly in my hands. Then I looked up at the stands, scanning the crowd, looking for them, my parents. I told myself they were just late. Traffic, parking, something small, something normal. Minutes passed. More people arrived, more seats filled. But not theirs. The ceremony started. Speeches. Applause. Names being called. And still, no sign of them. I kept glancing up, over and over again, hoping, waiting. But deep down, I was starting to understand. They weren't coming. Not this time. Not for me. When my name was finally called, I stood up, walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavier than it should have, because this wasn't how I imagined it. This wasn't how it was supposed to feel. I crossed the stage, shook hands, smiled, just like everyone else. But inside, something was breaking. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a realization settling in. When it was over, everyone rushed to their families. Hugs, photos, celebrations. I stood there for a moment, alone, watching it all happen around me. Then I felt my phone buzz. A message from my mother. "We're so sorry, sweetheart. Ethan had a situation. We couldn't leave him. We'll celebrate with you soon, okay?" I stared at the screen, reading it again and again, until the words lost their meaning. A situation. That was it. That was all it took. To miss one of the most important days of my life. I didn't reply. I couldn't. 'Cause I already knew. What I would say didn't matter. It never had. Instead, I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and walked out of that place on my own. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't call them. I just sat in silence, thinking, processing, understanding, because something had finally become clear. This wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't bad timing. It wasn't unfortunate circumstances. It was a pattern, and I had been ignoring it for years, but not anymore. That was the moment everything changed. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. I stopped reaching out as much, stopped expecting things, stopped waiting for them to show up, and over time, I built a life that didn't depend on their presence. 6 months passed, and in those 6 months, everything became different, stronger, clearer, more independent. And then one day, I took a photo, a simple photo, but one that told a story they had never bothered to see. And the moment I sent it, everything changed. 6 months after my graduation, my life didn't look the same anymore. Not because something big had happened overnight, but because something inside me had changed. I stopped waiting, stopped hoping they would suddenly see me differently, stopped expecting them to show up the way I needed them to. And once I stopped expecting, I started building my own routine, my own peace, my own life. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, intentional, the kind of change that doesn't need validation. During those 6 months, my parents called occasionally, checked in, acted like everything was normal, like they hadn't missed anything important. Like that day didn't matter as much as it did. "How are you?" my mom would ask. "Good," I'd reply. "Work going well?" my dad would add. Yes. Short conversations, surface level, careful, because I wasn't willing to open up the way I used to, and they didn't seem to notice. Or maybe they just didn't want to. Ethan, on the other hand, was still the center of everything. Every conversation eventually turned back to him, his struggles, his progress, his situations. And every time I heard it, it confirmed what I already knew. Nothing had changed for them, only for me. About 3 months after graduation, I got my first big opportunity. A job I had worked incredibly hard for. Not handed to me, not arranged, earned. The kind of opportunity that could change everything. I almost told my parents, almost picked up the phone, almost shared the news. But then I remembered graduation day, the empty seat, the message, and I didn't. Not out of anger, just clarity. If they didn't show up for the big moments before, why would this be different? So I kept it to myself, and I moved forward. The job required me to relocate. A new city, a fresh start, everything unfamiliar. But for the first time, that didn't scare me, because I wasn't carrying expectations anymore. Just myself. The move wasn't easy. New place, new people, new responsibilities. But it was mine. Every challenge, every success, every step forward, mine. And slowly, things started to fall into place. I found my rhythm. My confidence grew. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not by my family, but by the life I was creating. Then came the day everything shifted again. It was a normal afternoon. Nothing special. I had just finished a meeting at work. A big one. The kind that mattered. The kind where people listen when you speak. Where your ideas are taken seriously. Where your presence counts. After it ended, one of my colleagues suggested we take a team photo. "Come on," she said, smiling. "This deserves to be remembered." I hesitated for a second, then nodded. We stood together, relaxed, confident, proud. The camera clicked, and just like that, a moment was captured. But it wasn't just a photo. It was proof of everything I had built without them. Later that evening, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it again. That photo. I stared at it for a while, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. It showed something they had never witnessed: growth, strength, independence. And suddenly, I had an idea. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of truth. Because sometimes you don't need to explain anything. You just need to show it. I opened my messages, scrolled down, found their contact, my parents. I hadn't texted them anything meaningful in months, just short replies, polite responses, nothing more. But this time, I paused, because I knew this wasn't just a message. It was a moment, a statement, a reflection of everything they had missed. I attached the photo, typed one sentence, then stopped, read it again, made sure it said exactly what I meant. Nothing more, nothing less. Then I pressed send, and just like that, 6 months of silence was broken. Within seconds, my phone buzzed. A reply. Faster than I expected. Faster than anything before. I stared at the screen, because whatever they were about to say was going to show me something important. Not about them, but about everything that had changed between us. And as I opened the message, I realized they finally saw it. But it might have been too late. Part 3/5. My phone buzzed again, then again, and again. 3 messages in less than 10 seconds. That alone told me something had changed. Because before, they never responded that fast. Not to me. I opened the first message. From my mother. Lily, is this real? I stared at the screen, then opened the next one. From my father. Where are you? Why didn't you tell us? Then another. This is incredible. We're so proud of you. I read that line twice. We're so proud of you. The same people who missed my graduation, who didn't show up, who didn't ask. Now suddenly, they were proud. I didn't respond right away, because this wasn't simple. This wasn't just a message. It was a moment of realization. Not for them, for me. I kept scrolling. More messages. Questions. Excitement. Shock. Why didn't you say anything? When did this happen? We had no idea. And that was the part that stayed with me. We had no idea. Of course they didn't. Because they weren't there. Not when it mattered. Not when it was happening. Not when I needed them. They were there now. Because it looked successful. Because it was something to be proud of. But where were they when it was quiet? When it was hard? When it was just me, working towards something? I locked my phone, set it down, and took a deep breath. Because I needed to be careful. Careful with what I said. Careful with what I allowed. Because this wasn't just about answering messages. It was about boundaries. Again, a few minutes later, my phone rang. My mother. I let it ring, then stop, then ring again. This time I answered. Hello? Her voice came through immediately. Fast. Emotional. Lily? Why didn't you tell us? No, how are you? No pause, just that. I stayed calm. I didn't think it mattered, I said. Silence. A short one, but enough. What do you mean? She asked. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse. I just said the truth. You didn't come to my graduation. The line went quiet. Completely. Because there it was. The moment. The thing we had both avoided. I told you Ethan had a situation, she said softly. I know, I replied. But I still graduated. Another silence. Longer this time. More uncomfortable. Because now, there was no way around it. We didn't realize it affected you this much, she said. That sentence almost made me smile. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. I didn't realize I had to explain it, I replied. My father's voice came through in the background. Put me on speaker. A second later, he spoke. Lily, he said, we're proud of you. Really. I closed my eyes briefly. Because this wasn't about pride. Not anymore. I appreciate that, I said. And I meant it. But appreciation doesn't erase absence. Why didn't you tell us about the job? He asked. Because you didn't show up before. Because I stopped expecting you to. Because I learned to move forward without you. All of those answers were true. But I chose one. Because I wanted to see if you'd notice on your own. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Because they knew. They knew they hadn't. We would have supported you, my mother said quickly. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I just asked, would you have shown up? That question changed everything. Because support isn't words. It's presence. And they knew it. No one answered. Not right away. Then my father spoke again. We can do better, he said. I listened. Carefully. Because I had heard similar things before. Not exactly like this. But close enough. I'm not asking you to, I said. Another pause. But if you do, I added, it has to be different. Clear. Simple. No emotion attached. Just truth. What does that mean? My mother asked. It means you don't get to show up only when it's convenient, I said. It means you don't get to miss the important things and celebrate the results. Silence. Again. Because this time, they didn't have an answer. I'm not angry, I continued. And I'm not trying to punish you. That part mattered. Because this wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I just see things differently now. My father's voice softened. We want to be part of your life, Lily. I believed him. At least, I believed he wanted that. But wanting something and showing up for it are two very different things. Then be part of it, I said. Not just the parts that are easy. No one spoke for a moment. Because they understood. Finally. We'll try, my mother said quietly. And this time, it sounded real. Not perfect. Not guaranteed. But honest. I'll see, I replied. And that was enough. Not a yes. Not a no. Just space. After the call ended, I sat there for a while, thinking, because something had shifted again. Not completely, but enough to notice. They saw me now. Really saw me. But the question wasn't whether they noticed. It was whether they would change. Because noticing is easy, change is hard. And what happened next would answer that question completely. After that call, things didn't magically improve. There were no instant changes, no dramatic apologies, no sudden transformation. Just silence again. But this time, it felt different. Because it wasn't empty. It felt like something was being processed. On both sides. A few days passed. Then a week. No calls. No messages. And honestly, I didn't mind. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't hoping they'd reach out. I was just living. Work kept me busy. Life felt steady. Peaceful. And that peace didn't depend on anyone else anymore. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. Can we visit you this weekend? I stared at it for a moment. Because this was new. They had never asked before. They usually just expected. Or assumed. Or planned things without really considering me. But this was different. They were asking. Not telling. Not deciding. Asking. I didn't reply right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be intentional. Finally, I typed back. Yes, but only for a few hours. Clear. Simple. A boundary. He replied almost instantly. Of course. No pushback. No guilt. Just acceptance. That alone told me something had changed. Saturday came quickly. I cleaned my place. Not because I felt pressured, but because I wanted everything to feel calm, controlled, mine. When they arrived, I noticed something immediately. They looked different. Not physically, but in the way they carried themselves. Less confident, more careful, like they were stepping into unfamiliar territory, which, in a way, they were, because this wasn't their space. This wasn't their control. This was my life now, and they were visitors in it. I opened the door. They both smiled, but it wasn't the usual easy smile. It was cautious, respectful. Hi, my mother said softly. Hi, I replied. They stepped inside slowly, looking around. taking everything in. My father nodded. "You've done well," he said. "Thank you." We sat down in the living room. For a moment, no one spoke. Because this wasn't a normal visit. This was something else. Something new. My mother looked at me. "We saw your place in the photo," she said. "It's beautiful." I nodded slightly. "Thank you." Another pause. Then my father spoke. "We've been thinking a lot," he said. I didn't interrupt, didn't rush, just listened. "About what you said," he added. "That we only show up when it's convenient." I held his gaze. "And?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "You're right. Simple, direct, but meaningful." Because that wasn't something he said easily. My mother nodded beside him. "We didn't see it before," she said. "But we do now." I stayed quiet. Because words are easy. Understanding them is one thing. Living them is another. "We've spent so much time focused on Ethan," my father continued, "that we didn't realize what we were missing." There it was. The truth. Not defensive. Not justified. Just real. "And now?" I asked. My mother's voice softened. "Now we're trying to fix it." I considered that for a moment, because fixing it isn't instant. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't undo missed moments. But it can change the future. "You can't fix what already happened," I said calmly. They both nodded. "We know," my father replied. "But we can do better moving forward." That mattered. Not because it guaranteed anything, but because it acknowledged reality. And that's where real change starts. "I'm not asking for perfection," I said. "Just consistency." They both looked at me carefully. "What does that look like?" my mother asked. "It looks like showing up," I said. "Not just when it's easy. Not just when it's convenient." I paused. Every time. Silence. Then, "We can do that," my father said. And this time, it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a decision. We talked for a while after that. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just honest. For the first time in a long time, the conversation felt balanced. Equal. Not centered around Ethan. Not redirected. Just present. Before they left, my mother paused at the door. "Lily," she said quietly. I looked at her. "I'm sorry we missed your graduation." There it was. Finally. Not an excuse. Not a reason. Just an apology. I nodded. "I know, because I did." And for the first time, that was enough. They left shortly after, and as I closed the door, I realized something. This wasn't a perfect ending, not even close. But it was a real beginning, because change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, decisions, actions, and what mattered now was what they would do next. Because one visit doesn't prove anything. But consistency? That changes everything. After that visit, I didn't expect everything to suddenly be perfect. I didn't expect daily calls. Or constant attention. Or some dramatic shift where everything in our relationship was magically repaired. Because that's not how real change works. Real change is quiet, slow, proven over time. And for the first time, that's exactly what I started to see.